Again. Hello and welcome to the Yoga Lawyer Show. In this episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about the rule of law and what might happen if President Trump fires Mueller or Rosenstein. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about attorney-client privilege in the context of President's lawyer, Michael Cohen's office being raided. So with that, let's get started. Let's dive right into it. So the big thing about the rule of law and whether or not the president can fire Bob Mueller or fire the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, that's been a question that's been out there. We see a lot of pundits and other people on the news kind of suggesting that he can and that it would be okay. And as an attorney and as a member of the American Constitutional Society and other groups of lawyers that are nonpartisan, I feel it's important to kind of get the word out there that this would not be okay, and not from a partisan perspective, but because we are a nation ruled by law.
Not to say that he couldn't do it, he could, but it wouldn't be okay.
It wouldn't be okay. I mean, like, in theory, he has the authority to fire any type of inferior office.
Technically, yeah, because he appointed it.
Yes.
So he created the special counsel. Like, he's the one that started it, so he has the authority to get rid of it, but
I think he even maybe offices he didn't create. I mean, we'd have to get a little more into it. I mean, as the president, he arguably has the authority to fire anyone below him that directly answers to him.
Yeah, he can fire anybody in the DOJ because that's a department of the executive branch.
But now the issue is the intention behind the firing, and the special counsel statute specifically says it, and we'll get in a little bit later on to obstruction of justice. But basically, if the intention is to undermine the investigation into him, if the president's intention in firing Mueller or Rosenstein would be to undermine this investigation, then it's not legal. That's not a lawful intent, and that's why the president cannot do it. And to see people kind of suggesting that he can is a little bit disheartening and scary. As a democracy, as a nation ruled by law, nobody is above the law, including the president, who holds the highest office.
The brilliance of our system is that we may not like the outcome, but at least we know that the rule of law is still alive, that nobody has obstructed justice, and that's what may happen if Trump does end up firing these people. Or there were 3 action items.
The other one is if he were to pardon some of the key witnesses that Mueller has indicted, that would be another big issue.
Which he can. He has the authority to do that.
The pardon power.
A pardon would be letting someone off for showing remorse for their crime. He would give them a pardon, and he can do that, but it would look really bad.
Well, even that. So it's interesting with all of the statutes that control these issues, pardons, firing inferior officers, obstruction of justice, all of them turn on intent and what the intent is. And if the intent is to stop this investigation, then he cannot do it. That is not a lawful intent. He can only pardon anyone if the intention is lawful.
No, he can do it. He'll just have a lot of legal
problems.
I
mean, in theory, he could still do it, but it's not a legal pardon. It wouldn't.
There's going to be a big gang of lawyers who are like, wait.
He can't do that. Now, if he had a good reason for doing it, it's hard to imagine one in the context of the investigation, but if he had a good lawful reason for doing it, then it would be upheld. But if the reason is because he doesn't personally want to be investigated or he thinks it's a witch hunt,
not a great reason.
That's not a great reason.
Witch hunt, that's funny that you should mention it because we did some research and Mueller and Rosenstein are actually Republicans, so it's really not like a partisan witch hunt.
They're not only Republicans, but they're both highly respected members of their profession who served presidents for many years, both sides.
Bush appointed Mueller, and then Obama gave him his longest, I think it was like his longest, he holds his title as longest appointed whatever.
Right, so he served under multiple presidents, they're Republicans.
They're very respected.
President Trump should be grateful that these are the people that are investigating him and just allow the investigations to go forward. What we don't want to happen is for him to come forward and fire them or pardon some key witnesses, and then we really have the fear that our America devolves at that point into what more of an autocracy versus a democracy. Nobody has absolute power. We're not ruled by a despot, and that's where we would be headed.
And theoretically, he should enjoy his special counsel if he is innocent of the things they are investigating, because they are so respected and they're so good at their job. They're going to
exonerate him.
Yeah, they're going to do a thorough investigation, and after this thorough investigation, they find that he's innocent of these crimes. awesome. Nobody's going to question them.
No, yeah, exactly. Then
But
that'll be the end of it.
it's a little disconcerting and kind of, it's sketchy that you are talking about firing them.
Yeah, at all. And then it's also scary that there are lawyers on TV, and there's not a lot of them, because, I mean, the vast majority of attorneys agree that this is not something the president should do. But when we have, we've got such a politicized atmosphere in America right now, and we have these people going on, conservative talk shows and suggesting that this is something he can or should do, and that's scary. And that's why I feel an obligation as an attorney who's taken an oath to uphold the Constitution to get the word out in the way I can, to our, I think we're at 113 subscribers now.
Mm-hmm.
So to our subscribers and anyone else who might be watching this, no, this is not okay. And that most attorneys, probably 90-something%, would agree that this is not okay.
It's especially scary, and we've talked about this multiple times, because these attorneys that do go on these certain news outlets or news channels and say that it's okay, they're feeding into a population that only get that view. So they think that that's the only view, when we have a gang of bipartisan attorneys who are saying, no, this is not okay.
It's not okay because nobody's above the law. Like, it wouldn't matter if the shoe was on the other foot and it was a
Democratic president.
Yeah, or anybody. I mean, this is just not how it works. Nobody's above the law, including the president. And what's interesting is if we look back at another president, everybody's drawing comparisons with Nixon. I thought it was funny. I wrote down a quote that what Nixon said when he did something similar, like he fired the special prosecutor at the time.
Saturday Night Massacre, Archibald Cox.
Yes, and when he did that, he said, when the president does it, that means it's not illegal. That was his direct quote, and that really feels like a flashback to
what's a little scary.
I mean, that's kind of what's happening now. It's like he thought he was above the law. Yeah. And, and luckily at the time, Congress stepped in and, Nixon ultimately resigned, and we didn't devolve into a constitutional crisis. And we're sort of at the precipice here where a similar thing could happen. And it's scary. And there are groups that are ready to march should that happen. I wanted to give that information, and we'll post a link. But there's a website you can Google. It's Nobody is Above the Law. It's put forward by the American Constitutional Society, and you can sign up to be notified. And should President Trump fire Mueller, fire Rosenstein, or pardon one of the key witnesses, then you can be ready to mobilize and march and voice your discontent for that.
Or they'll just keep you up to date on anything.
Yeah, it's a really good resource
Yeah.
in general to go and look at that if you feel strongly about this issue like we do.
Another similarity between Nixon and Trump and their investigation is that his impeachment proceedings was based off of a case of obstruction of justice. So
yeah, we wanted to talk a little bit about that because, not to get too much into the Mueller investigation, but, everybody seems to be talking about, oh, well, there's no collusion. And honestly, just like from my gut reaction, I don't believe, I mean, I could be wrong, that Trump personally colluded with Russia in this election. But I feel like he's taken a lot of action since then to suggest that he's willing to obstruct justice and that he has obstructed justice. He went on national news and stated that the reason that he fired Comey was because of the Russia investigation.
Which was after a back and forth.
We don't even need to get into the Comey thing, because that whole thing has even gotten just way too dramatic. And that's not really...
He just came out with a book yesterday.
Yes. Who did? Comey?
Comey.
Oh, yeah.
He just released his memoir.
Yes.
He had an interesting interview. If you guys want to check it out, I totally recommend.
Well, yeah, maybe you could bring up the one thing that he said that was so good about impeachment, because everybody assumes that Comey is pro-impeachment. And what did he say?
He said that he wouldn't like for Trump to be impeached. He thought that it was kind of a gimme to us. It kind of lets us off easy when the election of a president is kind of a direct representation of American values. And he thinks that the best way to kind of fix our problem is for us to vote him out in the next election. And in 2020, we vote along our values. So maybe our values have changed in light of our president, but he doesn't think that impeachment would be the best option. And I agree with him, mostly because Pence scares me a lot. But I think that, we need to just make sure that we're getting to the polls. Midterms are coming up in November. If you want to see some change in the House, you got to get to the polls.
And let's vote for some independents, too. Gosh, I hate that we're such a two-party system. It's so crazy.
What's sad about that, though, is that even if we do get some independents in office, they're going to have to pick a side. That's how it happens.
There's got to be a way to fix that. But that's like another,
that's
video
like
for another time.
Founding Fathers thing. Like, that goes way back.
Lordy. But back to the obstruction of justice, we touched a little bit about, or we're talking about that a little bit, and that, the definition of obstruction of justice is basically like corruptly trying to influence or impede the due process of law.
Yeah, so again, that centers on the intent.
Intent. These all center on intent, and that's where I think President Trump is going to run into some real problems. In theory, he may have the constitutional authority to do some of these things, but his intent, which he's already voiced on national TV and on Twitter daily,
Goodness,
is really going to cut against him, and he really needs to just let this go forward. The other thing we wanted to talk about, because I think maybe we can go into the attorney-client privilege issue now, which has come up lately because Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, his office was raided after search warrants were obtained, and the question of attorney-client privileges come up. And, I think even President Trump himself may have tweeted or otherwise suggested that attorney-client privilege is dead because my attorney's office has been raided.
What's interesting is he's not really his attorney. Michael Cohen's a personal injury attorney.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he's a personal injury attorney, and he owned they're like medallions for taxi drivers in New York, so it's a big business. That's where he made all of his money. But he's not like...
Well, he doesn't practice law regularly,
No.
I know that. He only has 3 clients.
It would be more accurate to say that he's Trump's fixer.
Maybe, and that,
So maybe
personal
fixer
opinion.
client privilege.
But, so, that does bring us to attorney-client privilege, because what does it protect? First of all, it's not absolute. It would not protect any kind of criminal, fraudulent communications.
You would have a duty to tell them.
You would. But what it protects, it doesn't protect every document that an attorney has. It just protects communications between the attorney and the client that were for the purpose of obtaining legal advice. And
it's like the little asterisk, like for the purpose of.
So first of all, it doesn't appear that any of the documents that were seized represented any communications between President Trump. And, all the information isn't out there, so we need to gather more information. But preliminary news releases suggest that there absolutely were no communications between President Trump and Mr. Cohen, that were seized. But even if they were, let's assume they were, because they took all the documents. And even though he doesn't really practice law, he only has a couple clients, assume there were some privileged documents that were obtained. What happens then is a separate body, in this case called the taint team, that would then review those documents and redact anything that's privileged before it goes into the inquiry that's happening. So it wouldn't ever be viewed by the prosecutor or the judge or anyone that's actually sitting
Yeah, it would be used
issue
as evidence against him.
And this is what happens, and it's not unheard of for search warrants to be obtained and for attorneys' offices to be raided. So to suggest that this is somehow, again, a witch hunt or that it's partisan is really, I feel like...
It's almost like a suggestion that he's above the law.
It is.
Again.
It goes back to it again, that President
he should
Trump
have some special attorney-client privilege.
And it feels like, and I know he said this, I just watched the documentary about President Trump on Netflix, which is really good, by the way. But he said this multiple times in the documentary, and he's even said it recently on Twitter, that when he's attacked, he attacks back. And that's what this seems like. It's like he was attacked, so he's going to come out and yell and scream and say this is not fair, but we have to rise above it and look at it from a nonpartisan perspective. Even if you're conservative, even if you voted for him, it doesn't matter. Like, let's raise up and rise above the fray a little bit and see this for what it is, and believe in the rule of law and that nobody is above the law, and not take everything that he says or tweets at face value, because there is more to it. And personally, as an attorney, from what I've seen so far, there doesn't seem like any breach of attorney-client privilege. In order to obtain those documents, they would have had to have shown probable cause to a federal judge who then signed off on a warrant and then took extra precautions to make sure that privileged material was not released. And I've seen the rule of law in action, and the judicial branch is the one branch of government that I have utmost faith in. And as an attorney, my opinion would be that so far there has been no such breach. And to say that there is, again, undermines the rule of law of the country. It makes us question the judicial branch.
Yeah, and you have to assume that they're taking special precaution because of how high stakes this investigation is. So that it wasn't just a judge that was like, oh, okay.
No, not at all.
That they did some serious...
There's a lot of red tape to go through before it would get to this point. And there's nothing to suggest this might not even have anything to do with the Mueller investigation or the Trump, Russia collusion issue. I mean, from all appearances, it seems like Mr. Cohen may have just been involved in some bank fraud type issues. So we've got to let it go forward. And we will, we can talk about it more as it unfolds, because obviously we're dealing with limited information. But the main takeaway from today's show is nobody's above the law. Get involved. If you feel called to do that, we'll post some information. And that attorney-client privilege, while an important privilege, is not absolute, and it hasn't been breached in this instance. So we'd love to hear comments, feedback. Is there anything else we need to talk about?
No, I think we hit it all. We'd like comments.
We do. We'd like subscribers, so make sure to subscribe. Let's get up.
Yeah, and share our videos. See what your friends think.
Yeah, and we can always suggest future shows. We like to talk about legal issues. Let us know what you think, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching the Yoga Lawyer video.